today we are supposed to discuss the streets in the Arab world. And as we have distinguished panelists here, I would like first to ask everyone here on the panel to introduce himself, and then we'll start a discussion.
Thank you, Smadar. I'm Riad Khouri. I'm a Jordanian economist.
Elad-Altman from the IDC.
Sherif Diwany, Egyptian living in Switzerland.
Judy Miller, an American journalist.
Salman Shaikh, the director of the Brookings Doha Center.
And I feel that what happened in Egypt, which needs to be understood by everyone, whether the vice president and everybody, because there's a lot of interest invested and stakes in what's going on in Egypt, directly and indirectly, in the region, in the world, and so on. Neighbors like Israel, others in the region, in the Gulf, and so on. So if you understand in terms of cooking, I would say that what we had is really a big pressure cooker, which has been on for a long time. It was a very good pressure cooker, good quality, that maintained it for a very long time. And in that mix of things inside, we had great, nice vegetables, nice sauce, and so on. But then there are some onions. I mean, for those who don't like onions, there are some onions inside, and we're not sure what's going to happen when this pressure cooker explodes. It reached a point where it had to explode. So we have things now are coming out, and we don't know whether we're going to end up with the onions or the carrots and so on. So what happened really, I would put in two words. One is a social contract between the government and the people, who basically, the government was saying, I'm going to give you prosperity, I'm going to give you economic opportunity, and you let me rule because you don't understand foreign policy, and I do other things.
But as for the moment, the government is surrounded by the demonstrators. There is no contacts, and nobody goes in, nobody leaves the building itself.
Yeah, but the point why this occurrence is important in understanding and making decisions on how to deal with it. And so this contact was not really functioning very well, because the economic disparity between those who have and have not is so huge, is so pronounced and so obscene, I would say, that it is not sustainable. Now, there are risks there, but the longer it takes, it is taking too long. If you had asked me this question, let me try to make it short. If you asked me this question 1 week ago, I would say he should go and put an end to it. And the reason why I would say that, because the longer it took, the more radical it becomes. And then a number of things happen. The violence in the street, a lot of exposed. Before that, a lot of things happened in violations and so on, but it was not as exposed as it was because it was up in the open in the streets. So the violence, the mistrust, the radicalization of the crowd is becoming a bit sensitive and dangerous.
It seems, though, that the next stage, the second stage of demonstrations, which started already, will be in Jordan. And I would like to use your presence, Riad Khouri, and tell us what is really going on in Jordan itself, in the street and within the regime.
Thank you, Smadar. I wish I knew. I've been away from Jordan for the last few days. Traveling a lot. I was traveling before then. I read the papers, I watch television, I access the internet. I don't think that I have any profound insights into the Jordanian situation. However, since you asked, I'll try to answer your question. First of all, Jordan is not Egypt. And I say this with great respect to Sherif and the Egyptian people, who I think are doing a great job, the Egyptian people, in their expression.
But it seems, though, that the Jordanian street is boiling.
You're putting words into my mouth. The answer is no, the Jordanian street is not boiling. Yes, there is a crisis in Jordan. Yes, there is a problem throughout the Arab world. Things in Jordan are getting worse. The Jordanian street, however, as you put it, is not boiling.
And do you see a possibility that huge demonstrations will start in Jordan?
No.
Why?
Let me ask you, do you see a possibility of huge demonstrations starting in Jordan?
No.
Why?
I agree with you.
Then tell me why.
Because the situation is different. I mean,
This is exactly
Jordan
what I
is
was trying to explain to
smaller
you.
country, and
Precisely, thank you. However, it is not correct to say that we have exactly the same problems as all these other countries. We have different problems. We have problems. One of the problems, as I was saying, is the gap between the rich and the poor. And this, unfortunately, in Jordan has got worse over the last few years. It's not enough to say that your economy is growing by such and such percent. You have to add, for whom is this growth taking place? Are the very poor benefiting? Are they improving their situation, or are they stagnant? Unfortunately, the answer in Jordan and in so many other parts of the region is that the stagnation has been profound over the last year or two. And this, I think, is one of the major reasons for the crisis.
as we are speaking about the street and mobilizing the street, I have my next question for you, Salman, who lives partly in the US and partly in Qatar. Can you explain to us what's motivating Al Jazeera? Al Jazeera is dedicating the 24-hour broadcast for the last 2 weeks to provoke the regime, to get people to the streets in Egypt. And I'm sure that once they finish with Egypt, they'll go on with the next country.
Thank you. Let me just first say it's wonderful to be back in Israel, a country I used to live in and I'm very fond of. So, again, thank you very much for inviting me. Well, simply with Al Jazeera, it's telling a good story. They, I don't think, are necessarily the fomenters of this particular Arab People's Revolution. I think this is a much more of organic thing, which is born out of people's sense of hopelessness, lack of dignity, watching regimes round up people. I know many people in Cairo, young, at least 5 of them have disappeared for a while and then come back, young professionals. So I think the Al Jazeera angle is something which, of course, is much talked about. They do have a profound influence, I think, on Arab media and the Arab masses. But in this case, I think they're just catching on to a wave which has been generated from within these societies.
But don't you get the impression that they are the ones who are leading the demonstrations?
I don't think anybody's leading the demonstrations. The momentum of these demonstrations is being led by the people, which is why we can speculate for a day or two, well, are they waning? And then suddenly, while Ghanem comes on TV, and we have 1 million+ people, not the United States, and why should they? Not European powers, not Israel, not the regime are dictating the momentum. The momentum is being dictated by the street.
There is one country where I don't see a prospect of demonstrations in the Arab world, which is Morocco. And Judy, you have been there recently. Tell us the other side of the coin. Why is the Moroccan street so quiet during these days?
Right. I was just in Morocco as the demonstrations were starting in Tunis. And they were widely covered, by the way, in the Moroccan press. So it isn't as if the Moroccans didn't know what was going on. They knew. But there were no demonstrations. And I began to ask about the dog that wasn't barking and why. And what Moroccans would say was, well, you know, because we have a good king. And I realized, because I'd been to Morocco before, that by that they meant more than the fact that they had a ruler who had a very interesting policy of never giving interviews to the press, but being photographed routinely out and about, opening schools, blessing roads, inviting people to come to the new market in a town in the middle of the desert. They like their king. And the king has extraordinary religious legitimacy as the commander of the faithful. So he doesn't have to explain or justify his right to rule to Moroccans, which is a fairly conservative culture. And there are two other factors that struck me. One is Morocco has 40,000 registered NGOs. And these ranged from everything from very tiny village-level basket weaving societies to enormous human rights groups and groups pressing for greater human rights and civil rights. So there is political space in Morocco that doesn't exist in a lot of countries. And finally, this is a little-known fact that I hope to publicize, but in the past decade, even though there's a huge gap between rich and poor, the Moroccans, according to a new study by the Carnegie Institute in Beirut, which now has a branch, has reduced the number of people living in poverty in a decade by 40%. And the end result of that is that Moroccans feel that they have hope, that they have future possibilities. And even though they have the youth bulge, the demographics that have led to what we see in Tunis and Cairo, we're not seeing it in Morocco because I think there are just a lot of factors that are good governance factors and young people who feel the future may be theirs.
My next question is more of academic. We got used to looking into the Arab countries, the Arab regimes, as two camps. One is the regime itself and the people who surround the regime. The other ones were the intellectuals. I think we neglected the Arab street or the Muslim street. And my next question is to you, Israel. Can you try to draw a sketch of what's going on now, because I think that the camps are mixing?
Good question, difficult to answer. I'm not sure that we can really now make solid judgments and assessments of the processes which are taking place. I think we are in the beginning of a wave, which only beginning, only starting. We don't know where it will lead. Morocco can be quiet today, but unquiet tomorrow. A few days before the eruption in Egypt, many people, including myself, were saying that Egypt is not Tunisia because Tunisia was a pressure cooker with no room for expression and opposition. In Egypt has opposition parties, and you can demonstrate it, you can do this and that, and media which speaks out, and lo and behold, it happened. So any prediction in this stage, it will be difficult. I tend to see this wave as significant as the two previous ones, which appeared in the Middle East since the Second World War. The 1950 revolutions of the officers with the Arab nationalist ideology, and then the Islamist wave in the 1970s with Iran and then Lebanon and the Palestinians and so on. This could be of such magnitude, but we still have to wait and see. And I think Egypt will be key, because what happens in Egypt will greatly influence what happens in other countries, given Egypt's central position in the Muslim world. And this includes from Morocco and Algeria and all the way to the Gulf states and Syria and Jordan and the other places. So I wouldn't really try to analyze now what's happening between regimes and certain elites, because it is still a lava and is not yet crystallizing, so that you can really make a good judgment.
I don't know how it's going to come out, but I do want an orderly transition. I don't think it would be a good thing for Egypt, even though the Egyptians will decide this, for the Muslim Brotherhood to have a disproportionate influence on their society. I don't think the Muslim Brotherhood is the big boogeyman that we've heard many people describe it as here. However, the longer this goes on, I have to associate myself with Salman's analysis, the less credible Omar Suleiman becomes as an overseer of a transition. And I think it's very important that a man trusted by all sides, but especially by the security establishment who represents the security establishment, have a pivotal role in that transition. So I, as I did the other day in the Daily News, will call upon President Mubarak to sacrifice himself for the greater good of Egypt and his regime, which is, believe it or not, what I think he's always wanted. So this would be the moment when he could prove his devotion to the country he has worked for 30 years.